Welcome to Evolving with Every Step, your safe space for unearthing life's lessons. We're your sisters, Ashley and Brittany, and together we will explore the depths of life's experiences.
We will discuss the growth and expansion that comes when we get curious around what these experiences can teach us. So take a seat, join the conversation, and let's evolve with every step we take. We are so happy you're here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our episode of Evolving with Every Step. We are so happy you are here today and joining our conversation. Before we get started on the topic today, I do need to say we have a trigger warning. Today's topics, we're going to be discussing abuse, verbally and emotional abuse. We're going to be talking about substance abuse and addiction. We're also going to be talking about mental health. So if these are topics you're not ready to listen to other people's experiences of, we do welcome you to wait for our next episode, catch up on past ones if you haven't yet. If you are ready, please stick around, join this conversation. And of course, we have to start with our disclaimer. It's important we disclose we are not mental health professionals. This podcast is in no way to replace therapy and or any medical intervention you may need. We aren't coming into this as experts and we don't have it all figured out. We're entering the space as students of life alongside you. Being a student of life means the lessons never stop. And so we are also continuing to learn and grow each and every day. And we're so happy you're here to do that with us. So, hi, Ash.
Hey, Britt.
Let's get into the topic today.
So today we are going to share our story. I know we provide little bits and pieces in previous episodes, and we thought before we go forward and share more amazing topics with you guys, we wanted to provide more context from where we are coming from. And so I do want to preface that this is not going to be a venting session. The experiences we share today, they are painful, but we have, through our faith and through therapy, have worked hard to understand its impacts on our lives and discover the lessons we can carry forward. And most importantly, we have found forgiveness.
Hmm.
We may sound emotionally charged during some of the things we talk about, and it isn't because we have unforgiveness in our heart. Sometimes when you go back to a painful memory, you feel those feelings again. And so we just wanted to let everyone know, like, we're good. It's just sometimes when you go back, it can feel a bit heated because you're being reminded of those emotions in the moment. So for
Hmm.
today's episode, we are going to try really hard to format it in a way where when we share our experience, we can also show you the insights we drew, how we were able to connect how that experience and impacted our life going forward, and then also share the lessons we learned from it that helped us heal. We hope it helps our listeners to maybe recognize that they're not alone in some of the experiences they had. Maybe it's going to help you draw connections to things you experience now that are tied to something you experienced in your past. And maybe it'll also help you see what lessons you can draw from it and how you can heal going forward. Now, a lot of our story does revolve around our father. The mental health and addiction, the things that he ended up getting into played a really big part in our life. But before we dive into some of the hardships we started to experience, we really wanted to take time to talk about who he was before this all happened. He truly was a wonderful person, and I don't think it's fair to speak to the difficult things that happened without sharing the amazing person he was before. And this also is going to provide a bit more context as to why we stayed in this situation as long as we did. I know myself and Brittany and my mother, we were just fighting so hard to bring this man back to us. And so, with that, Britt, I'm going to pass it over to you to kick off sharing a bit about what dad was like.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so many great memories with dad, and I know you do too. He was what would you call it? Such a presence in the room.
Mhm.
Like in the good years that we had with him, everybody loved Mike. Everybody loved him. Him and his brother, they were the guys to be around. These were the guys to know.
The
He
cool
was
guys.
they were they were the hockey guys. They were good looking guys. They were they made friends with everybody, and that's what
Yeah.
just I remember about him is that he made friends with everybody, made connections with everyone. He was my hero. He was a little girl's hero. I was just so in love with my dad, and I wanted him to be proud of me with everything that I did. He taught us attempted to teach us all the sports. We were not athletic, but I mean, you were a little
We
bit better
tried.
than I was at things. My hand-eye coordination is still not there. Just ask Ollie anytime I try to throw him something, it goes opposite ends of the room. But God bless dad for trying to teach us these things.
Yeah.
Um, I remember him, like, skating up like, taking us out to go skating, and I'd be in my little figure skates and him coming up behind us and swooping us off the ice and then zooming around on his hockey skates. Like, he was just one of those dads that was so fun to be around, but he also was stern and disciplined and made sure that we were well-behaved kids, where he
Mhm.
did provide that fatherly structure that we needed
Mhm.
and would spoil us every once in a while too. Like, we would have great, like, sled days when it was snowing outside, take us to the apple factory to get a good apple pie, to watch Hockey Night in Canada. Like,
Mhm.
oh my god, like, we had such a perfect childhood, and those are the memories that I think about when I think of him now that I cherish forever. I can, like, go on and on, but Ash, tell
I
us a little bit
know.
about your memories.
Oh, I think you described it perfectly. He literally was, like, my hero, and, like, I do remember those times. It was, like and I think, like, as a little girl, your first love is your dad, right? I was
Mhm.
so in love with my dad. I thought he was just the coolest guy, and I can still, like, the memory that it's, like, burned in my brain. I can still remember him coming home from work, and the family had a printing company. He worked in the office, but it didn't matter. You worked in there all day, the factory, the smell of ink was on you,
Yes.
and
It's so
I have,
pungent.
like, this core memory. Every time he came home, I ran and, like, jumped into his arms, like, practically bulldozed him to give him a big hug, and I just remember him smelling like ink, and that was, like, my
Um,
favorite time of day when dad got home from work, and then he'd sit on the couch, and I'd sit with him and tell him about my day, and this is going way, way back when we're really little, and, we heard this and I think it's also, like, people spoke so highly of him to us even when we were that little. At that point, he had had his first transplant when we were, like, babies,
mhm.
and he was the man who he was the hockey star in high school and he got the scholarship to university. And then he ended up becoming this really successful businessman. And then he had a transplant and he could have died, but he
Yeah,
pulled through and he survived. And not only did he survive it, he continued to take care of himself. He was still
yeah,
ripped and he
yeah.
like still was in sports and he was still successful in business and he had all the friends and like we were entertaining all the time. And life was just really, really good. And I heard of just how resilient he was and thinking this man is like my dad, like he's the coolest guy and just any moment with him was like gold, right? Like I
Yeah,
just soaked up every moment and I was just so proud to be his daughter and just the image of mom and dad together, right? At
mhm.
that time, like mom's a beautiful woman and dad was a very handsome man. They were like Barbie and Ken. And I just
Yeah.
remember looking at them and just being like, these are my parents. And I don't even know how when you're years old you can feel that kind of pride. But yeah,
My
but
parents
I
are
did.
hot.
Yeah. And I
I
just
felt that too. I actually have a memory of saying to mom when I was really little, like, "Mom, dad's really good looking." And she's like, "Yeah, he
I was
is.
like, yeah, he is.
That's my husband."
Yeah, and oh man, after he passed away and we pulled out some of those home videos, I'm so happy we had them because just you could even get the sense of who he was in those videos and the way he talked to us, which was just not the way it was in the end. Like I'm so grateful for them just to be able to go back to that because that's the thing is and the reason why, like I said, it'd be totally unfair to jump into the things that were bad without sharing this part of him because he really was such a beautiful person. And I also wanted us to share this part because I think when we talk about people who give into addiction and things like that and they go down that route, like this can happen to anybody.
Mhm.
Anyone can experience loving someone or being that person who, like, everything in your life starts to go downhill, and then the mental health takes over and the addiction takes over, and just the domino effect of tragedy that happens
Mhm.
throughout a lifetime with that. And it's difficult. It's just such a painful thing to experience, and really when someone is still here and it's not them, you
Yeah.
are mourning the loss of that through the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And so I think where we wanted to start off and where we really remember life getting to be really difficult was after his second transplant.
Mhm.
And, that was when I was about 10 years old and Brittany would have been about 8, and we
Yeah.
remember him. I think what was happening was, I think his liver was just it was starting to fail, the one that
Mhm.
they had given him. And that was the first time we saw our father weak, and there was
Yeah.
nothing wrong with weakness, he was sick. Uh, it was the first time, and at such a young age, to just understand the potential of losing a parent. Like,
Mhm.
that wasn't hidden from us, and I don't think it should have been, like, but it was a really tough time because we were looking at our father potentially dying, like, any minute we could get that phone call.
Yeah.
Our mother, who was our rock and our foundation and was always there, all of a sudden wasn't. She was at the hospital every day. She was our dad's guard and his advocate while he was there,
Yes.
and I know he needed that.
Absolutely.
With that, though, when you take children at our age, we were so young, you're dealing with this really crazy amount of stress. You're so small, you don't know how to process this stuff, and then, we were so blessed. We had really amazing family that stepped in to
Mhm.
help. So
Oh,
blessed
yeah.
for that. We can't look past the fact, though, that as a child, being totally out of routine, not with your foundation, such scary things happening, and then you're
Yes.
moving from family to family. It really, like, I just remember feeling nauseous that entire couple months that that was going on.
It feels like a bit of a haze, to be honest. Like, I think because there wasn't any structure, that whole summer felt like such a blur of not being home.
Mhm,
Like you said, we had really great family that everybody tried to pitch in to help where they can. Our grandparents moved into our home. Like
mhm,
they moved out of their house just temporarily, moved in with us, and looked after us while mom was at the hospital. But they have to live their lives too. They have to work. So then other family members throughout the summer be like, we'll take the kids for a couple days. We'll take them for a couple of days. So then we're going from not having our parents to them being taken care of by our grandparents to them being in other people's homes throughout a very impressionable time in our life where
mhm.
structure and stability is still very much needed. I still see that impacting me, and I'm still working on that to this day of it being
Yeah,
okay to be off of a routine and for things to be a little unstable because that to me feels chaotic and unsafe.
yeah. And from those, and like you mentioned, so, when we went into therapy and we looked back at different times of our lives, you notice this, we both have this, that we're both still working on, is this really intense need for control
Mhm.
and routine. And I mean, even just staying at someone else's house and getting ready in their bathroom gives me such cringe, just because I'm like, this is not
It's not my
my
stuff.
space, this is not my stuff. And I'm sure other people get that too, but I know this is tied so much to that. There was so much out of control in our life then.
Mhm.
And the other piece that started to develop in me too was the catastrophizing, um, because
Oh, yeah.
dad got sick and he almost died. Like, things just were such an extreme that happened that all of a sudden now, you know, that's where my brain goes. And then even as he got better and he came home from the hospital, we were taught you need to wash your hands when you get home from school, because when you have a transplant, you're put on immunosuppressants. So you've got a really weak
Mm.
immune system. So things like a flu can put you in the hospital.
Yeah.
So I just, in my head, I was like, I have to wash my hands. I have to make sure this is clean. I have to make sure that's clean because dad could get sick and he could die. Like, it just was such an extreme thing trained into my brain that has,
Yeah.
unfortunately, still impacts me a bit today. I'm working on it. I know how to talk myself down from it. But those are some things that happened then. And then, just because this did play a big role in my life, and it's still a part of because it's a diagnosis I was given. Um, I was diagnosed officially not until I was in my 20s, but with obsessive compulsive disorder, and this is something that started to really pop up a lot during this time.
Mhm.
So,
Remember.
it's like, what's the term when it's, like, adding pain to injury or, like, whatever the phrase
Insult
is
to
called?
injury
Insult
or
to injury, thank you, yes.
yeah.
So, on top of dealing with and when I say OCD, I'm not talking that, "Oh, yeah, I got that. I got a little of that too." Like, I need things organized, I need
No,
things
this
clean.
was I
No, I'm
remember your
talking
symptoms of it as a child, and it's scary now to think about, and, I mean, I was 8 years old, so I didn't even know what OCD was,
Mhm.
but and I thought, like, "Why is she doing that? She's so weird." Looking back on it now, it is scary to see that how real it was for you.
Yeah, and, like, the part that's tough that and we'll have a different episode about mental illness, and we'll talk about that and a bit of our experiences, but it's the intrusive thinking that is what really was getting me because I
Mhm,
mean, people you can go on Google and look it up, and it'll explain it for you, I won't get into all that here, but there's such guilt and shame that come with that, and then even the compulsive behavior to be like, "If I do this, that means this won't happen." Um, I thought I was a freak, and I thought there was something totally wrong with me. I didn't know who to talk to about it. I didn't know what was going on, and so and I mean, something that I did learn through therapy with OCD is and something I notice now is and it actually has become my little superpower, I call it, because if I start to get a little if things start to become overwhelming, it starts to kick in. And I recognize that. And I can kind of
mhm,
be like, okay, I don't even know yet that I'm overwhelmed, but this is kicking, which means there's something I have to take a look at.
mhm.
It's a form of anxiety disorder that is your brain's attempt to bring control to your life, which makes a lot of sense why it
Yeah.
popped up when it did.
For me, I have not been diagnosed with OCD or anything, but I do have similar tendencies that where when things get overwhelmed, my other mental health issues do kick in and skyrocket as well. And I think, like what you said, it can be your superpower in identifying that something is wrong and you do need to start taking more control in the sense of like evaluating what's going on in your life and what you need to do to change things to get healthier. Um, but yeah, it's interesting that you say that. And that's where therapy really helps
Mhm.
identifying what these things are and identifying the changes that you need to make because it helps change your thought patterns as well. Like when you can identify it, you know, okay, this is what I need to do to feel better.
Yeah. And I mean, like you said with the therapy piece, I mean, this is why I can tie it to that because I had therapy and I was able
Mhm.
to go back in time and realize that this is where this started and what triggered it and things like that. Um, but that so just to go back to that period of time, you know, it was, I was developing these anxiety disorders and didn't understand what it was, and that on top of everything else that was so out of control was just I mean, that's where anxiety got really bad for me was at that age. Were there
Mhm.
specific did you notice or do you remember at that time, Brittany, like, specific mental health issues popping up for you?
Um, my lack of trust really started to kick in around that time. When I say trust, like because I wasn't with one person at a time, I couldn't trust what my next day was going to be like. And that's where my controlling and obsessive need to be clean and to be organized really kicked in. So, like you said it in your speech at my wedding, that I was like the cleanest kid. Everything was so organized. Everything
Mhm.
was in its specific spot. If somebody messed up my room, like I hated when you sat on my bed because you messed up my bed.
I
Like I
didn't
remember
know
like get
that.
off my bed because you're messing it up.
Oh.
That's where I was. And like my friends would say that too. Like I had my Build-A-Bears. I like 14 Build-A-Bears. They all had their specific spot in the cabinet and they had to sit next to a certain Build-A-Bear. Like that's just where it all started because
Mhm.
like you said, everything was so out of our control and there was no structure that I had to create that false sense of control and structure in
Yeah.
areas that I could control.
And it's funny no, not funny, but it's interesting when you look at how your behavior was since then. You've
Mhm.
always been very disciplined and it's
Yeah.
carried right through. And like obviously your discipline has helped you achieve a lot, but it also can cause you a lot of stress
Mhm.
too when you don't loosen the reins a little bit. So it is very interesting when you get curious around these things that you experience where it can stem back to. And so that's where that all kicked off for us there. The next piece for us in the story is that, you know, our father came out of the transplant and there was a lot of things going on. First of all, I don't know what it would be like to go through not just one, but two liver transplants. Like,
Yeah.
that is insane to twice in your
Surviving.
life be told that you might not survive. Like, and you've got a
Mhm.
family that you might like. I don't even know what that does to you mentally. Um, and then just the recovery is so long and difficult. But then they switched up the medication he was supposed to be on. And I remember mom telling us that. And
Mhm.
I remember mom also explaining that when he got changed on the medication, he started to get really depressed. And at the same time that that happened, the family business, when he went into his transplant, it was doing well. And when he came out, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And it got to a point where they were doing so poorly, he had to sell it. I remember him being devastated because he gave up dinners with family. He worked on weekends. He did so
Yeah.
much to build up this business and then it went to crap and now they were selling it for less than he was projecting to sell it prior to his transplant. And he was really banking on actually retiring in a few years. Like that's
Yeah,
where
it
he
was
got
like
it.
5 years. I think he said by the age of 45, he was gonna
He
retire.
was going to retire. Yeah.
And this was before he turned 40 that all this happened.
Yeah. And so I can't imagine what it's like to put so much of your time and sacrifice so much to then have that fall. And at the same time, you've just had the second transplant and you're exhausted and they've changed your
Mhm.
medication. It's messing with your head. And not just that, this was during the Oxycontin like epidemic, they call it. It was the early
9/11
2000s.
happened?
9/11 happened the summer. Actually, he was in the hospital when it happened. So there was like just everything was crazy, and then he got addicted to the painkillers, and I remember mom saying she went to his family doctor because she's like, "I think he's depressed and I don't know how to help him. Can you talk to him?" The doctor tried and dad got so mad at her, and
Yeah.
since then, she didn't, you know, go back to his doctor, but she did. I remember her doing so much research to try to figure out how to help him.
Mhm.
In that, though, he got more, depressed, and he got angry, like, he was so angry, and, like, I mean, I get it, you worked so hard towards something, and it
Yeah.
was taken away, and it's like, "I gotta start all over," and he's had this transplant, and he was told after this transplant that he'd have a 50-50 chance of living 10 more years. So on
Yeah.
top of that, you're trying to digest the fact that, you've got a daughters who are 10 and 8, you might see them live to 18 and 20, 50-50 chance of that happening, like, I don't know what that does to a person
You
either,
have,
you
like, a
know?
timestamp on your life now,
Yeah.
on top of everything that you worked so hard for has gone to the ground,
Yep.
and you're not feeling your healthiest anymore, you're
Mhm.
depressed. Uh, I can't imagine being in that situation, like, how you pick yourself up from that. It would take a team
Yeah,
to help keep you going.
and he completely changed. Like, that was, like it might have been over a course of a year or 2, I don't but it's, like, then he changed, and he started drinking, and it was just that period of time. So, oh, man, I mean, you're talking about 10 right up until the day he died, he never got free of that, and it just got worse
Mhm.
as we got older, and he became so verbally and emotionally abusive. I think what first started out is he started becoming very absent.
Yeah,
So, we'd have karate tournaments or we'd be, graduating up to a new belt. It's a proud moment as a kid, or you have a piano recital
piano,
or a play at school. And he didn't come because he wanted to stay home and watch his soap opera or watch the hockey game. And
because he
he,
couldn't drink while he was there.
that's the thing, right?
He
Or
didn't
he
wanna be
had,
around
yeah,
people.
he couldn't drink while he was out. And as you know, so then you wanna look at how that impacted us going forward. I was starting to learn that I was not worthy of his time.
Mhm.
This person who was my
Yeah.
hero, who I just like, any amount of attention he gave me, like we said, it was gold, and now all of a sudden, I was not worth it.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I carried that with me right into my 20s.
Yeah.
Just, I'm not worth it. I'm not worth
Mhm.
anyone's time. And when you talk about what that does to your self-esteem, I had none.
Yeah. I have to say the same. We know that's not true, that we weren't worth it to him. It's just that when you're in that much of a depression and sucked into your addiction, you can't think of anyone else but yourself and your pain that
Yeah.
you're going through. We see that in hindsight now, but also, again, a very volatile age for having a strong father figure present. And I also felt like I just wasn't good enough, that I wasn't worth it. I wasn't worth anybody's attention.
Mhm.
Um, Constantly seeking approval in other areas, like from
Oh.
teachers, other family members, from friends,
Mhm.
anywhere that I can get it because I wasn't getting it from dad.
Constant validation. I mean, when they say daddy issues, it's a
Yeah,
thing and people laugh about it, but I'm like,
it's serious.
don't. You're talking about a person who was raised in a situation to be taught that they are worth nothing. And
Mhm.
so they are just trying to find, and this is why, and I feel like it goes in a couple ways. Like some people become a bit more, they find it in relationships or but you can do it in work. And that's what we
Mhm.
did. Like we just tried to find our self-worth in school. So get those grades because you got an A, that was like your little validation or get to work and like you do overtime to get that validation. It becomes like this addiction of trying to fill
Yes.
that void that you
Yeah.
have because you didn't get that affirmation from a parent.
Yeah,
And
and
as a
now
Oh, sorry, go on.
yeah, I was gonna say, and now you're gonna be seeing that in social media now. People are now searching for that validation through social
Mhm.
media posts, and what does that get you? It's, again, a very, very rocky environment to be looking for
Yeah.
that,
Mhm.
and you're never going to be satisfied. You'll just get a little dopamine hit here and there, so just
Yeah.
if you're finding yourself going through the same thing, be careful.
Yeah, you're looking for the next like and share and all that stuff, and it only the yeah, like you said, it's a hit and it lasts like a very short amount of time, and then you're looking for the next thing. And so as we progressed, the absence turned into if he wasn't being absent, he was being verbally and emotionally abusive. And I know we shared a
Mhm.
bit about this before. My personality is much different from yours and mom's, right?
Yeah.
He always said I love to argue. It wasn't that I love to argue. If I didn't think something was right, I was going to stick up for myself.
Yeah.
And he knew that I was more reactive, and so I often was picked on. And
Mm.
unfortunately, I was called names. Like I was called things like a bitch and a spoiled brat, and I was compared to people that he said he didn't like or had a poor opinion of. And so I just also want to just say, like, this is happening. Like it was like a cocktail in my brain of my OCD where I was already feeling like such a messed up person and like I just had this running dialogue of you're weird, this is not normal, you're a bad person, all this stuff. And then I had my father on top of it calling me a bitch, telling me that I always cause drama, that I'm the reason why there's problems in the house.
Mhm.
So you're talking about like I think just him alone would have been enough to cause that problem,
Yeah.
but mixed with that I was getting this really deep root that I was just overall a bad person. I was unworthy and I felt like I was just like a burden in people's lives. Like I felt like I caused more problems than I did any good.
It breaks my heart. 'Cause, like, you're my big sister, I looked up to you so much, and it breaks my heart to know that you felt that way going through family life at such a young age, and, no, to me, we did not think of you that way, mom, and I never thought of you that way. We did worry because of all the conflict going on between you and dad, and sometimes that anger was from you was reflected on us, but I know it was all of us just trying to survive in that environment, and on top of that cocktail you mentioned, you're also now grieving the loss of somebody that you looked up to so much,
It
and
was and like just if I can just point out, it was confusing because
Mhm,
here was the thing. And I don't think mom didn't I don't think understood what she was doing. She was trying so hard to bring this her husband back, right?
yeah,
And she kept telling us to be patient.
yeah,
Dad's going through a lot right now. It's going to be okay. we just, he's been through a lot and and so as
Yeah.
very young, we were being taught to be very empathetic to someone who was hurting us. And this isn't to say that if someone hurts you, you don't show them mercy and forgiveness and like you don't work through it. It then got to a point where we were starting to constantly excuse the way he would act because he had been through so much.
Yeah. Giving excuses for poor behavior, like, wait, like, there is no excuse for treating family like that. There is no
Mhm,
excuse. We have a lot of compassion for him looking back on that now. Just I have a lot of sadness and compassion looking back on that now,
mhm,
thinking of the pain that he was suffering internally, that he felt that he couldn't share with us, that he felt like he couldn't seek other options. He felt that was his only way to numb his pain
mhm.
was to go into his pain meds and the alcohol. But that's the reality of addiction. Like, that is the reality of that mental health. And for me, in that experience, I hear you and dad arguing a lot. And I've even witnessed him having you backed up against a wall and his finger in your face pointing at you to the point where it looks very threatening. I learned to withdraw. I learned to be silent and to hold my tongue because if I say anything, if I express my emotions, I'm going to be that person up against the wall having his finger in my face. And so for me, how that showed up was I had a very hard time expressing my emotions into my adult years where now I'm so proud of myself. I'm able to express them in a much healthier way.
Oh, yeah. You've
After
come
oh,
180
a
from
long
before.
time. It
Yeah.
took a long, 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 long time to get there to trust that the other person will listen without getting mad at me. And I
And if
spent
I
a
could just make one point to that,
yeah.
because you're so kind, you would never share this piece, but I know that I contributed to this. And I know it because when we got out of it, and we'll get into it a bit more in a second, was also being taught that the way to express yourself was through anger. And
Mhm.
I was well on my way to becoming, I feel like, an abusive person. I just would get angry and lash out. And I was so hurt that if you shared anything with me that you were upset about, I couldn't show up for you, and then I would get angry at you. So
I feel like you felt like you were going to be like you were under attack if we came to you to approach or talk to you about something that we were upset about that maybe you've said or done.
yeah.
You were on the defensive because you were still living in fight or flight,
Yeah, that's
that
true.
you thought that anybody coming to approach you was going to you were already on the defense that it was gonna result in that huge battle that you would have with dad,
Mhm.
where it was very scary and hard for mom and I to have those discussions with you, but again, we look back on these things with compassion and say, "Well, yeah, of course, because look at what you were conditioned to believe what conversations were." We were conditioned
Difference the
yeah.
difference is, though, is I went and I got help. Like, I was like, "I don't wanna be an angry person. I don't wanna
Mm.
react this way." Like, a disagreement doesn't have to be a blowout. Like, that's not
No,
healthy. That's not a
no.
norm. Like, that should not be your norm. And so I went and got help, and I can honestly say now I really don't get angry anymore. I realize anger was a lot of covering the real emotions I was feeling. But that's the
Let's
thing.
just, let's pause on that note for a moment for our listeners to take in. Anger can be covering the real emotion underneath
Mhm.
that you're not ready or you're hiding from actually experiencing. Because I
Yeah.
remember you saying that point to me for the first time when you came out of therapy, and from that point forward, I noticed a shift in you. It was
Yeah.
very small, but I did notice a shift in that you may feel the anger first and you would even like vocalize, I know there's something else underneath this. And then you would go journal, reflect, whatever it might be that you needed and come out as a different person.
Anger is easier to feel than sadness. Like, just think about when you're about to leave, like, anyone who's had to, like, say goodbye to someone because 'cause they're leaving for a while and you're gonna miss them. Think about it. Do you guys get into a fight before they go? Because 'Cause you're
Yeah.
just both sad and aren't ready to feel those emotions are being so you it's anger. It's easier
Yeah.
to feel that. But anyways, I didn't wanna get off. I wanna continue with your story, but I just did wanna say, like, it wasn't just dad for you, like, I was
Yeah.
slowly becoming, like, angry like him too, and I was reacting in that way towards you as well.
Yeah. Mom too, like, mom was also withdrawing. She was
Yeah.
me and her hid from the conflict and, we became avoidant. We avoid conflict. So, just we'll get back on track, but fast forwarding to when you were in university, so it was just me and mom at home alone with him. I spent
Mhm.
a lot of time in my room or in a different room than what he was in. So those years became very lonely years
Yeah.
for mom and I because we it was either just her and I in a room together or we were separate because we tried to avoid being in that environment because if you may have gone into the room, sat down just to watch TV with him, and he would find something to argue about. He was just so
Yeah.
angry. He needed to let that anger out in some way, and I remember having an argument with him over crunchy tacos. Like a real I'm not talking about like one of those funny arguments that you have with friends or a sibling or whatever about like what's superior, crunchy tacos or soft tacos. No. He was legitimately so upset that we had tacos for dinner because they get messy and it elevated into me like walking away and him
Mhm.
saying how spoiled I was.
Yep.
Like just it made absolutely no sense. I'm like, "I don't understand. It was Taco Tuesday. I thought it was gonna be a fun night." And this was the kind of behavior where I was like, "Okay, I just gotta stay away as much as I can."
Yeah. And, oh, those were tough times because you I mean, I've seen the clips where people talk about kids who grew up in unstable homes, and you really do learn to listen and understand the footsteps. Like, you can
Mhm.
just hear the footsteps. You can hear, like, the way someone's carrying themselves. Like, I got so in tune to how he moved throughout the house to know, like, what kind of mood he was in.
Mhm.
S To be so hyper aware like that, it's you know, it's helped us learn to be hyper and, like, I guess, again, it's a bit of a power. You can be a bit hyper aware, but what was really sad during that time, being that young, is we both kind of were starting to own this thing that we were then responsible for our
Yeah.
father's reactions and his mood.
Yeah.
And, of course, we all have to take responsibility for how we treat each other, but at the end of the day, we can't control how someone reacts. And not just that piece, but also that I owned on myself, and I don't know if you did the same. I kept trying to bring him back. So as a kid,
Mm.
where a parent would normally try to take interest in their child and what they're into, I would try to take interest in what he was into so I could get that connection with him again.
Yeah.
I didn't love watching hockey, but I'd sit and watch the hockey game with him. I would try to be like, "Hey, like, do you like can we go to the driving range and you could teach me how to play golf?" Like, I did enjoy that, but it was like I was constantly trying to find ways to make him happy, and I wish I could go back to my 14-year-old self and just be like, "Girl, like, this is so beyond you. Don't own
Mhm.
this," because every time I
Mhm.
didn't succeed, it felt like this giant failure to me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think for me, I was just so I was just so desperate to not be a victim of his verbal diarrhea that I withdrew from everything. Like, I would sit and have conversations with him, but I just remember a lot of the time being uncomfortable being in a room with him, like, just being on edge,
You
having
weren't
that
safe.
constant
That's the reason,
yeah.
right?
I didn't feel safe. He wasn't somebody I could feel safe around, and I had like, just a constant knot in my stomach being there with him. So, there would be times where we would have really great conversations, or I'd show him that I got an A on a test. He'd be like, "Yeah, that good for you. That's great." Um, but I just felt like because I was 2 years younger, and at that age, 2 years younger is significant in
Mhm.
maturity, I just completely withdrew from it. Like, I can't be around this, um, which is sad, and I do remember we did try it was a joint effort to try to get him to be better, like, try to get him to eat healthier,
Mhm.
try to do things to make him happy, like, maybe make meals that he likes, whatever it might
Yeah.
be, but nothing was good enough, and that's, again, us looking for that validation, looking for that, approval from him that we weren't gonna get.
No, we weren't. And as we got older, things got worse, and the the crazy thing when you live in a home where you're with somebody who is emotionally and mentally and verbally abusive is sometimes you don't understand that that's what it is that you're
Yeah.
experiencing. Like, it wasn't until I went to university and I got separation from it, and I actually was in, like, psychology and sociology and learning about it that I realized, "Oh my gosh, I am a victim of abuse," and, I mean, I don't like to use the word victim because I like to think
Yeah.
that I take ownership of my experiences and move forward, but I had to come to terms that that's what happened. People you not you closing a cupboard door too loud does not equate to someone being up in your face and yelling at you and starting this whole argument. Like, I'm talking arguments would start from nothing,
Mhm.
become a huge blowout, and that was, like, a regular occurrence on the daily, and I'm telling you, that is I don't care. I don't care what you are used to in your life, that is not healthy and it's not normal, and we were so desensitized, and the thing is it wasn't just him.
Yeah.
His family and we will never name names here because, like I said, when we share these stories, forgiveness, like, I am not
Yeah.
holding anything against anyone, I'm speaking to experience. There was a conditioning, though, in how people treat each other within this family, and
Yeah.
people would blow up on each other, they would say the nasty just the nastiest things. So we were just it was just that being taught that extreme reactions to things were normal and very rarely and so the thing that I want just so people get an idea of what the pace was like for us growing up was if there wasn't drama at home, there was drama in the family. There was always some sort of chaos, someone talking shit about someone else. Like,
Mhm.
it was always constant drama and constant fighting, and we talked about this in a previous episode, but our dad got into this pattern of having people in our life in his family and then cutting them off. We started to learn a lot about conditional love,
Mhm.
and so from here, I learned that I developed a fear of speaking up for myself, a fear of extreme rejection, because that's what it was. Like, when you're growing up in an abusive home, you are experiencing rejection
Yeah.
at a deep, deep level from a parent. And that's why if somebody was giving me even constructive criticism, like if you that's why when you and mom would try to talk to me about things that you didn't like or whatever, I took it as an attack, like as extreme rejection. And that's why even after things ended with that relationship I had at the time through university, I didn't date for a few years because like the idea of rejection was just
Yeah.
absolutely excruciating.
Yeah. I had to take breaks from it too because the rejection wasn't just like it could be somebody that I was just talking to for literally, like, a couple days, and all of a sudden they ghost me, and it would cripple me, like, it would absolutely break my heart because I was
Mhm.
rejected again. I also had a very hard time making friends because initiating conversation with people elicited that fear of rejection that they would think I'm weird, they wouldn't like me, that I'd also have social anxiety because of that fear of rejection, so I would just always be afraid, even with some family members and, like, cousins, being alone with, like, people that I genuinely love and
Mhm.
I'm, like, blood tied to, being in a room alone with some people, I would freeze up and not know what to say, and I would have that kind of social anxiety, so I try to avoid being alone in a room with somebody that I'm not normally
Mhm.
around,
Yeah,
and
well, it's because the smallest things that you could do that shouldn't elicit any reaction could in our home result in you getting screamed at, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, absolutely. So it's funny to see that rejection tying into so many areas and like it literally just clicked to me that the rejection was linked to my social anxiety as well.
Yeah.
Of
See, look, we're still learning.
still having these epiphanies of learning these things about
Mhm.
ourselves. And what's great about having these realizations is that then it's just another thing for you to work on me. Like I can say comfortably now, I'm in a job where I am forced to talk to people on almost a daily basis where I can have conversations with people now, but social anxiety is still real. It's still there, but you learn to work through it.
So, let's fast forward a bit to university because we did get to a point where mom did leave and we did walk away, but there was an attempt that happened first before that one.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, we came home for Christmas. I was in about third year university. You were in first year. And I remember dad had started up his own business again, and there was an issue with the website. He couldn't figure out how to get something to fix it or something. He asked if I could take a look at it just because I guess I was younger. So he thought I would know it. I didn't know how to fix it. It turned into a huge, huge fight. Like, he pretty much like, we had plans to go to Rochester to visit our aunt and uncle for New Year's and all this stuff, and he pretty much told me that unless I could fix his website, I was not to go, and we got into such a big fight that he walked up to me and in my face said, "You better shut up or I'm gonna do something I'm gonna regret." And when mom heard that, she was like, she knew what he meant, and she was
Yeah.
like, "We are out of here." And we packed up our suitcases and we drove to our grandparents, and my mom was like, "I can't, like, this is horrible. I can't do this." And so during that time, dad was, like, obviously talking to everyone, and he was just giving
Mhm.
his sob story, and he kept talking and telling everyone that if mom didn't come home, he was gonna financially ruin her. All while during this time, mom and my
Threats.
dad's brother were trying to find rehabs that would take him, but no one would take him because he had had a transplant. They didn't want the liability of having to take someone off a substance when they
Mhm.
had that kind of complicated health. And this time was so I remember this time being such a moment of deep hurt and, like, anger to the point I cannot even describe because I remember going back we went back to school after the break, and mom was still with Nana and Papa, and she called us and said, "I'm going back."
Yeah.
And I was like, "What do you mean you're going back? Like, you can't go back there. Like, this is not good." People that we trusted in his family who we're still close with, they were all saying, "Kim, you gotta go back. He's going to financially ruin you." And first of all, I'm thinking, why was that a thing? Like, I kept saying,
Yeah.
I was like, does that not even scream louder that we shouldn't go back? That it's not, I want
Mhm.
my wife and my kids back because I love him. It's if you don't come back, I'm gonna financially destroy you.
Threats. Threats.
Exactly. And it was all control. And this is the thing is in his mental health and in his addictions, he became also very, very controlling. And that's a big reason why him and I clashed so much is he kept trying to control me and I kept pushing back. And this was him trying to control. And the thing I found, because this wasn't just him, people in his family would do this too. People would be threatened that they'd be written out of the will, like as if we were characters from Young and the Restless. Like,
Yeah.
relax, you're not Victor Newman.
Yeah.
Um, it was something that the whole family got conditioned to, though. Like, this is how you
Mhm.
act, and you better listen to the person who is making the threats.
Mm.
And so I was very angry because mom went back, and I remember then it was coming up to reading week, and I had to stay at school by myself. I couldn't come home. And I
Yeah.
remember being terrified at school because it was a time where the houses we lived in were known for getting broken into over breaks because they knew people weren't home. So I was a single, like, like young girl, like living by myself at school, and it was terrifying. And I just felt so hurt. And it's messed up. And I know when I talked to mom about it, she's like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I went back to a home where my daughter couldn't come home
Yeah.
to. And I had a lot of resentment towards people who told her to go back. But this is something that I learned as I got older and we did the digging into all this is and this is something I want people to keep in mind if you're trying to leave an unhealthy situation. Sometimes you can't go to the people that are close to it
Mhm.
because they are conditioned in it.
Yeah.
They may not be the people to support you because they have been this is so normal for them. They don't see why you're
Yeah.
leaving.
Yeah.
Also going to be met with people who are not strong enough to see the reality. They
Yeah.
need to protect themselves by looking at their ideal version of this person versus the reality of it. So when you've got to understand what's healthy for you. And if it's not
Mhm.
healthy, you might lose people along the way because there are people that are not ready to see the truth or they're so conditioned they can't show up for you the way you need them to. And
Yeah.
that's what I learned and now when I look back at it, like my heart breaks for these people because I think oh my gosh, like, you thought this was normal, and it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. This is not normal behavior, and you also don't know it's not normal behavior until you separate yourself from it.
Mhm.
And I've even had, like, some family members reach out saying, because 'cause they're listening to our podcast, saying like, "Wow, I forgot how toxic things were and
Yeah.
the things that we used to say and do in the family." So there has been recovery since then and
Mhm.
realizations from separate parties since then, but I don't think the family actually understood how dangerous it was until we did finally leave,
Mhm.
and dad continued his threats in other ways. And going back to, like, mom saying she couldn't believe she went back, she also was just trying it, like, we didn't know what resources were available to us at that time. Mental
Mhm.
health, survival of abusive relationships, still fairly newly being discussed at this time. I also understand she wanted the best for us and felt that we would not be able to continue university and get a good education and have a good future if dad did what he threatened and financially ruin her. Because
Yeah.
we would have been cut off from any financial assistance as
Yeah.
well.
Mhm.
So,
And money was often used and threatened
yes.
over us, and so, um, Brittany, do you wanna share that moment where and I mean, look, everyone people listening are all gonna have their own beliefs. When I tell you, I feel like this came down from God because I we didn't even plan to have this conversation, and it just happened, and so, do you wanna share about that moment when we had lunch with mom?
So it was 2 years later. You were doing an extra year at university. I was in my 3rd year, and it's kinda crazy how the stars all aligned for this to happen. I decided university was not what I wasn't getting what I wanted out of university. I had all the credits that I needed to graduate still, uh, with my degree, so I decided to graduate a year earlier, and we were then going to graduate at the same time. We were both leaving university at the same time.
Mhm.
We were having lunch with mom, and we both said to her that we're leaving school this spring. We cannot come home to that house. We do not feel safe going back to that house. You have to do something about it. Like, we straight up gave her permission, like, "You need to leave dad,"
Mhm.
because she also was not feeling safe in that house. They weren't sleeping in the same room anymore. There were times where she didn't feel safe going to bed at night, like,
Well, there was a
because of
period
his
of
anger.
time there's a period of time when we came back for, like, when I would come home and I would be scared for her, and I would get into bed with her and sleep with her at night, and
Yeah,
I would put something in front of the door.
yeah,
Like, this is where I'm like and maybe that was never gonna happen, maybe, but when someone is really abusive and they speak really spiteful and hateful things over you, you don't know what
mhm,
they're capable of, and he was like, so full of rage, like, I've never seen or met anyone just so angry, and it was getting to a point where he was just looking for somebody to lash out
mhm.
at.
He needed somebody to be his punching bag, and mom did everything she could to stay away.
Mhm,
She would find excuses to stay at her parents' place, saying that she was dog sitting when they were not away.
mhm,
So, when we had that conversation with her, we're like, "Let's get a plan together. We know it's gonna happen at some point this summer. Like, obviously, it can't happen right away. Let's get a plan together, and we'll get out all safely."
mhm,
Our grandparents agreed to take us in, when the timing was right. We knew it had to be, strategic, so she left first saying that she was dog sitting for our grandparents, and we stayed behind. But then an opportunity arose, and Ash, you can get into that conflict that you had with dad that led to us departing.
yeah, so we were supposed to have our graduation ceremony that June, and dad had gone out and bought a whole new suit for it and all this kinda stuff, but it was getting to a point where you and I were like, "Mom and dad haven't even talked in a few weeks," and I could hear dad talking to his friends over the phone about how he apparently didn't understand what was going on with their finances and saw it and said he was going to pretty much make mom pay for everything. So he was already like getting in this very negative space. And I knew that he wanted our graduation because it was going to be an opportunity for him to confront mom. And I remember thinking and talking to you about it. And I'm like, we've gotten through university despite everything that
Mhm.
he has done. Like, we spiraled into like, I was like, I mean, there were points in university where I was having panic attacks. I didn't even think I was gonna be able to graduate because things just got so bad and anxiety was so high, and I said, We have worked so hard for this moment. He's not gonna use our graduation as an opportunity to confront our mom."
Mhm.
And I remember I said to him, I was like, "Look, there's a lot going on right now. We are gonna push our convocation
Yeah.
convocation is that how you say it? I
Yeah.
forget. Our graduation ceremony to October, and he had an absolute fit. And, um, my boyfriend at the time was staying with us that week. That's why my mom felt comfortable with us staying with my dad and her not being there, just so if people were like, "Why did she leave and leave you there?" We had another man in the house, and she knew that he would be on better behavior with that person around. I remember the way dad was talking to me when I told him that, and he basically was saying that I was like this selfish person. Like, I don't know, he was going off and he was saying how, I might not even be alive by October. That was like a big thing he used against
Mhm.
often, was that he might not even be alive then, to manipulate us and all this stuff. And he was saying such horrible things to me. And I remember my boyfriend at the time being in the other room and being like he was like I had to, like, stop him. He was, like, gonna come in because he was about to lose his shit on dad. And when we finally left and got out of there, I remember him, like, talking to mom being like, "I cannot believe what I heard." Like, I can't like,
Yeah.
I knew things weren't good, but I didn't know it was like that. And so dad was texting back and forth for a bit, and I eventually said to him, which, like, I was about to say, "My mistake," but no, like, his reaction was so extreme. I was like, "You're being selfish. You're not using graduation as a reason to go and confront mom and all this drama." And he's like, "You have 15 minutes to get home and get your stuff out before I lock you out." So we were like in a panic. You and I went back there. We packed up all our stuff. I left the key and we left. And that was when we
We
all
never went
left.
back after
We
that.
never went back after that. And then the story that went around the family was, well, Ashley, she's a brat and she threatened to move out. And so I called her on her bluff. And that was the story that went around. And
Mhm.
so we left, and it was like, there were people, it's sad to say, I'm not surprised, but there were people that never reached out to see if we were okay when it happened.
Yeah.
And so just to fast forward, he did obvious like, us leaving was the hardest thing, and it was probably the hardest thing my mother has had to go through because he just made everything absolutely torturous. And,
Yeah.
um, there was a manipulative tactic he tried to use, and Bert, I'll let you tell the story because it's what happened to you, but I do wanna touch upon it because I have heard other people experience this even in romantic relationships when
Mhm.
someone's trying to control them. So I'll
Yeah.
pass it over to you.
So, because I never fought with dad, he felt like he had a good relationship with me, and so, like, he didn't understand why I was, I was being brainwashed by you and mom, essentially, and he said,
Yeah.
"If you guys don't come back, I'm going to kill myself." And he said, I left my will on my desk in my office. I'm gonna take a bunch of pills tonight and, hope I don't wake up in the morning." So I called the police. I called the local police and I told them the voicemail. It was a voicemail that dad left, and he sounded belligerent like he already done the act, like he already taken all the pills. So it was
Yeah.
very believable. I called the police. I told them what happened, and they're like, okay, we're going to send somebody over. They sent someone over. The will was sitting on his desk, but he was just sitting watching TV. He had no idea why they were there. So because they saw the will was on the desk as he said it would be in the voicemail, they had reason to believe that, like, he was about to do this act. They also could see the alcohol consumption, smell it on him, I'm sure. They took him to a hospital for surveillance for 72 hours. We were blocking his calls at this time, so I had to go into my voicemails, and I saw one from him and multiple ones from him after he was in the hospital being detained, saying, "Brittany, I was just joking. Like, you need to tell these people that I was joking. They're holding me here at the hospital for 72 hours to make sure I don't actually kill myself. You need to tell them that it was just a joke. I need to get back to work." I want to know.
I know.
I want to know what makes you think that is a joke, a threat of suicide, especially to your daughter, is not a joke. That was an absolutely traumatizing experience.
Well, and the thing is too is, like, here we are. We never Here's the thing with our dad, like, during this process, when we left, we didn't leave to hurt him. We
No.
left because we were being hurt and we needed to get healthy and we needed to keep ourselves safe. And so we never at any point reached out to talk poorly about him to anybody. People who called us and talked to us, we'd share our story and what was
Mhm.
going on. And so there's people that we called that had not reached out to us that are part of our family because they were with him, and we never wanted to turn anyone against him because we knew who that he needed help and he still needed
Mhm.
someone to support him.
Yeah.
And we were reaching out to these people who we knew were not happy with us and saying, "Look, we got this voicemail. Like, I need you to know this is what's going on." And these people, like, berating us on the phone during that too. Like, it was
Oh,
just
yeah.
when I tell you this was just such a traumatic evening. And again, I've heard from other people where they've been in relationships where they go to leave or whatever, and someone is threatening to take their life. You know what? It is not your job to make sure someone doesn't hurt themselves. Of
Call the
course, don't be
police.
the person that's pushing someone in that direction, but you got to get them help. Like, call an ambulance, call the police. Like, it is
Call a
not
crisis line. Someone
exactly like
it is
it's
not your
not.
responsibility.
And if someone's doing that, like, it is unhealthy. Like, I can't say this enough. Like, if you're in a relationship with someone who uses that to control you and then all of a sudden then they're fine, oh my gosh, red flag, not good, unhealthy. You need to go get therapy because you need to figure out how to handle those things. I mean, the obligation is you call the police. Like,
Mhm.
that's what you got to do to make sure that person is okay. But it's not good.
Oh,
And that was a really traumatic moment.
yeah. So, from there, just we also don't want the false expectation that when you leave an abusive situation, that it's all gonna be okay. It is actually one of the hardest things is recovering and
Mhm.
finding your new normal because you're leaving we were living in fight or flight for, I would say, at least a year
Yeah.
after that.
Oh, I would say longer.
Longer
And
probably, yeah.
the thing is, though, is like just a few months later, we lost our uncle, so our dad's brother, tragically. We won't go into
Mhm.
the details out of respect for him and his family. I don't think it's our place to share that story.
Yeah.
So, and we were very close with him. So it was like, lost our dad. My relationship at that time ended. Our uncle had passed away. There was so much loss happening all around
Mhm.
us. A year later, our grandfather passed away. It was a lot.
Mhm.
And when we ended up, the 3 of us renting a little townhouse together. That's when we really started our journey to healing. And I was just the absolute ugliest version of myself. Like, I I mean, I had so much anger and I honestly had so much resentment towards you and mom even, just because
Mm.
I felt like I was the only one that stood up to him, and I got so upset because I felt like I was the one that took the brunt of his anger. And I share that because I imagine there are people out there where you've experienced something in your family and you hold resentment towards other people because maybe you felt you got the more difficult side of it. But the thing is everybody, and what I learned through this is everyone is suffering in their own way.
Yeah.
Like you said, like, you were also under attack, but you had to shrivel, like you shriveled up and you lost your voice. And
Yeah.
I had to, I mean, I think the one thing that helped a lot through therapy was not just understanding myself, but learning how to understand other people and their perspectives of their experience because we're all so unique and different. And I can now understand that, mom was a woman who the love of her life was slipping away and she was trying to bring him back and still be a mother. And then she had to own being the breadwinner and take care of a house and take care of the kids. And she was just trying to
Mhm.
survive.
Yeah.
And I was just like, here's the thing, you, me, mom, we were all just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And then we were put in this house. And again, neither one of us were ready to actually take care of each other. We had to take care of ourselves and heal.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember us having that conversations, like, we were all breaking down, and I remember saying, "I don't think we can be a source of healing to each other. We can't be turning to each other for any sort of validation or words of encouragement. We can be a shoulder to cry on, but we're
Mm,
so damaged that we need to work on ourselves before trying to be there for somebody else." And that is when we started therapy, but we
yeah.
did start to come out of our shell. We started to socialize with people again. Like, we stopped socializing with people. When he was really bad, we stopped seeing family members. We stopped seeing friends. We didn't want people to come over.
Oh,
And we started
yes.
to break out again and live our life, like figure out what is it to be in our early 20s? What does
And
that look like?
this is where I want people to be a bit cautious when you've got friends that all of a sudden are starting to um pull away. So I think some people can get very judgmental, like, why don't they call us anymore? Why don't they hang out with
Mhm.
us anymore? I really encourage you to approach people like that in your life with compassion and understand what's going on in their life because our mom completely pulled herself out of her group of friends. Like, she didn't go around anyone because she was so
Mhm.
miserable. And I actually remember when we were in that townhouse, we were watching Friends
Mhm.
and mom started laughing at an episode. And we'd watched Friends with her before. She
Yeah.
never laughed, and here she was, like, and this is where I could tell she was starting to come back because she was laughing, and I remember I
Yeah.
hadn't heard her laugh in so long.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. And then seeing, like, we lived around the corner from her best friend from when she was 3 years old, so she got
Yeah.
to go hang out with her and
Yeah.
socialize with those people again, and seeing
Mhm.
that was such a blessing to us to see her happy and, like, working out and getting healthy, like, feeding back into herself.
We found out our mom's fun. Like, I didn't know
Yeah.
she was fun.
Yeah, who knew? She's a time to be around, and anybody that knows her listening to this is like, "Hell yeah." We
Yeah.
love we love hanging out with her. Most of the times, our friends would wanna come over to our place because they wanted to hang out with her. So, she was like a bonus.
Yeah.
But there's, like, with that, you with the recovery phase of it, yeah, you come out of your shell, but then you start learning what your triggers are, because there are
Oh,
triggers
yeah.
that are gonna bring you those emotions back to what you experienced during the abuse. And that is what elicits a lot of anxiety, a lot of
Mhm.
depression. You may go back into avoidance because you don't wanna expose yourself to that anymore, but
Yeah.
the big thing is you do gotta work through it. You have to feel the emotions. Another important thing to listeners is, yes, I definitely used alcohol at times to mute the
Mhm.
emotions,
Yeah.
and what happens with that is that the emotions come back even stronger.
You're just putting it
You
on pause. Like, that's what I
Yeah,
call it. It's like, "Oh, I don't like this. I'm gonna have a drink. Pause.
yeah, like, I don't
Put
wanna
one
feel
side of
this. I had a
tape."
really bad day, let's have a drink. Oh, this is bringing up a bad memory, let's have a glass of wine.
Mhm.
But then the wine wears off, you're hungover, and then you feel even worse, and the emotions come back.
Yeah.
In order to make the emotions go away, you have to feel them and you have to work through them.
Mhm.
I love me a glass of wine. I love me a cocktail every once in a while,
Oh, yeah.
but I am very conscientious now of why I'm drinking.
Mhm.
And if it's to avoid feeling something, then I don't.
Mhm. And so we were actually on and off in communication with our dad after this. We would not talk to him for a while, then try talking to him again. He'd blow up, we'd take a break. And eventually, though, you and I had finally, we were living downtown at that time. We had bills to pay, we had big girl jobs. We were trying to live life. And we finally, we finally decided we had to cut ties. He
Mhm.
blew up on us again. I won't go into all the details, it doesn't matter, it's just he was berating us, and it was awful, and it's sad because the last words I heard him ever say to me was that I we will be peasants without him, like, that was the
Yeah.
last thing he ever said to me,
Yeah.
um and I understand it's because I decided not to talk to him again, that those were the last words I heard, but I came to this point where was like, "This is impacting my mental health." Like, I would be taking sick days off work because I'd be feeling so low after he just, like, ripped me apart.
Mhm.
And I remember, like, and our boss was awesome. Like, I would tell her, like, "I'm going through this with my dad right now, and I just need to take a mental health day," and all this stuff, and she was very understanding. But then I got to a point where I realized he can't be the reason why I have to keep taking a sick day.
Yeah.
I need to take care of I need to be healthy. I need to be able to show up to work. I need to be able to show up for my life. Like, I have bills to pay. I have a life to live. And this was really impacting my mental health in a horrible way. And when I do not say this lightly, and trigger warning, there were times in my mental health with him where I just didn't understand what the point of life was. Like, I really was like, why do I even stay here? Like,
Mhm.
life just felt that dark, and that's how much an abusive energy can just drain you completely, and, people say, "Well, why do you keep talking to him?" Gosh,
Your
I just
dad.
wanted my dad back, like, I wanted
Yeah.
him back so badly that I just tried everything I could and then finally realized it's him or, this is gonna end me.
Yeah. Yeah. I felt honestly what happened with me is I got insomnia. I
Mhm,
got insomnia the moment we started talking to him again when we moved downtown. I stopped sleeping, and we all know the importance of sleep, and I have a very strict sleep regimen because of that. Because I went after that, it was like 3 years of no sleep,
mhm.
pretty much. But once we made the decision to not talk to him again, it got a little bit better. And that does kinda stick with you when you think that your father's last words not think, they were the last words that were not gonna amount to anything without him.
And so here's the thing, like, that obviously tragic and very sad. Some things, though, I started to realize, and this is what I want people to understand that have been through this situation. I was always told that I was the problem. I was always told that I always caused drama. I cut him out and I didn't talk to certain people in that family for years. And let me tell you, there was no drama in my life.
Yeah,
I was like, where I'm the drama, where is it? I don't see
it's a
it. Like,
common denominator here.
yeah. And this is when of course, I was still doing therapy. This was also the time when I officially got diagnosed with OCD, so I was doing CBT, which was huge in helping me rewire my brain,
Mhm.
and I realized, "Oh my gosh, I'm not the problem, it's not me, like, I'm not the person that was causing all this," and the other thing that was really crazy too is I realized I didn't know who I was.
Yeah.
We when you get wrapped up in this kinda stuff, okay, you identify with it. It becomes your
Mhm.
identity. When people say what's going on, you bring up the drama. You bring up this is what's going on in my life. But it wasn't my life. It was his life. I was identifying myself with all his drama. And
And
so you and I were like, we cut ties and it was like we had to start over. Who's Ashley? Who's Brittany? Because the hell
not
I
just
knew. Like,
that
I didn't know who it was.
Not just that, we also took on each other's baggage.
Yeah.
Like, we felt responsible for the other person being in a bad mood or having a bad day, and so,
Mhm.
like, if I was having a really good day, you came home from work and you were in a really bad mood or you were really upset or you're having a bad anxiety day, then I would take that on, and I would feel guilty for being in a good mood.
Mhm.
And then everybody's mood in the apartment had to change to cater to that person. And it was same for you with me. We both felt responsible for each other and built that codependency on each other because, like you said, our identity laid on our dad.
Mhm.
We eliminated that. Now we kind of clung to each other. And I guess that's us just trying to like wean off of that dependency or not dependency, but trying to build a new identity. You kind of like latch yourself onto the
It was an old
closest.
pattern. We were used to always trying to monitor and, um, help, like, manage the emotions of the people around us, so then we were doing it with each other,
Mhm,
essentially.
mhm. But eventually, as we kept growing and learning about ourselves and
Mhm.
slowly breaking away from the codependency of each other and dating,
Yes,
we
we really oh, man, I felt like we just had to become, like, teenagers again because we
yeah,
didn't have that carefree childhood where we could just have fun, and I think being downtown in Toronto was such an amazing opportunity for us to
yeah,
just go out and have fun. And we learned a lot about ourselves. And Toronto has such a very special place in my heart because
mhm,
we both grew so much and we were warriors in our healing. We
yeah,
did the therapy, we
the
showed up
work,
like, oh my gosh, something would happen and we were like, okay, why do I feel this way? Why is this happening and how can I make it better? And it was intense work and it takes intense
mhm.
work to
Being
heal,
able to
you know?
identify our emotions too as they happen, as opposed to when I used to bottle them up and then blow up inappropriately.
Yeah.
Me being able to say, "You know what? I'm having a really tough emotional day today. It has nothing to do with you. It has to do with this.
Mm,
Just let me work it through and I'll be fine."
yeah.
Like, that is huge, huge accomplishment for me. And we were seeing ourselves grow and flourish and have fun and experience life as it should be in your 20s.
Mhm.
And yeah, like also dealing with the pains of everything being so expensive and having to work really hard for it.
But we started
Um,
building our own life,
yeah.
like, that's what it was. We were both going on our own little journey to figure out who we were, and that was a really special time in our life. And so, I do wanna fast forward. It was about 5 years since we had talked to our dad,
Mhm.
and then it was during COVID, we got the phone call that he had passed away.
Yeah.
And, ugh, when I like, I know we had not talked to him in 5 years, but I'm telling like you said, we never stopped loving our dad for 1 minute
Yeah.
during any of this, and to walk away from a relationship, especially when because there was so much guilt tied to it, we knew he wasn't well, like, his ill but, like, in addition to his addiction, like, his health was declining just based off of being that liver transplant patient. We had so much guilt. We felt
Mhm.
so bad, and the way my therapist had explained it to me is when you have strong family values and then you've got to walk away from family because they're hurting you, you are going to feel a tornado of emotions because
Mhm.
on the one hand, you want to heal and keep yourself safe, but you have to go against your values in
Yeah.
order to do that. And it's a very confusing and difficult thing. And I tell people it's not like I cut ties and then everything was perfect and I was good with that. There would be some days where I had to put my phone away and hide it so that I didn't text him or didn't call him. Like it was a conscious decision and it would be years in. And I think, I just want to make sure he's okay. Like maybe I
Yeah.
just call him, but I was like, I can't open up that door. I can't open up that door. Like I've done so much work in my healing and, um, so I just want people to know, like, if you've walked out of a relationship and you've questioned, like, "Oh, maybe I'm good now to go back into it." Think about
Maybe
it.
they've
Like
changed. Mm-mm.
yeah.
Mm-mm. Don't. You
And
left
it's
it for a
not
reason.
yeah, and I mean, every situation's unique and different. There might be situations where people have done the work and gotten better and then good, but we were dealing with a situation with someone who was abusive, who was just getting worse in how they were treating people, and they didn't wanna be helped. And we tried,
Mhm.
and so many people tried to help. He didn't want to be helped. So when you fast forward, we get the phone call that he's passed away. And I mean, we're devastated.
Yeah. We always thought first devastation, your father's passed away. Second devastation is that we always, and I guess it was wrong for us to have this expectation that someone in the family would let us know when his time is coming up. So we had an opportunity to say goodbye to him because we
Yeah.
wanted him to leave this world knowing that
We did love
because
him.
we did love him, despite the fact that we left, we never stopped loving him, never stopped thinking about him. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every holiday, we thought about him and loved him and always prayed and hoped the best for him.
Mhm.
But we needed to leave for our own health.
Yeah.
And we didn't get that opportunity, and that's something that we have to live with. And
Yeah.
that was another thing that we had to learn to heal from as well as on top of the grief. First, we had the grief while he was still alive of losing
Mhm.
the person that we knew as our dad, and you're grieving him for the whole duration of his life. And then it's that final grief of they are actually gone now.
Yeah. And oh man, that was just because there's so much emotion. Like grieving a complicated relationship is one of the most like confusing things to go
Yeah.
through. And like you said, we knew that when we stopped talking to him, we took a risk of not being able to say goodbye to him. We were in contact with people who still talk to him, and guess probably would have been better if we had communicated this at some point,
Mhm.
but I just didn't wanna open up the door to him again because I was so afraid of going back to that space. I had hoped that we would be told, and so, I mean, we found out that he was in hospice for 5 weeks. He told the people who only very few people knew he was dying. The people who knew, he had told them he didn't want anyone to know.
Mhm.
Do I agree with the decision to not have told us? No. But I can
It's a
say I understand.
it's a gray area for sure.
It is, and I mean, it's so much easier to be angry at people who just decided not to reach out to us, but the thing is he was part of that decision,
Mhm.
and I realized after doing some work, um, it's easier to get mad at the people that are still here because you can. When the
Yeah.
person's gone, they're gone and you can't, and
Yeah.
I realized that the situation that he ended up being in was one that he developed himself, and I would have loved to have walked in to say my goodbyes to him, to tell him I love him, to tell him that offer my forgiveness to him if that's what he would have
Mm.
wanted at the time. Like, I would have done all of that.
Mhm.
And it took a long time for me to come to terms with the fact that that was not given to us. But like I said, I don't I don't hold any anger towards anyone because it was a very
No,
complicated situation, and we all like to think we'd act differently if we were in that situation, but you don't really know
you
until you're
don't.
there.
And apparently he was just as awful up to his dying days. So,
Yeah.
I can imagine just being in that situation with somebody and knowing, and I know that they knew that we would have wanted to say goodbye,
With him.
so that I can't imagine being in their position.
Yeah. Yeah. So, oh man, and like that whole week was just such a horrible experience. We walk into and it was a very small service and funeral. Um I feel very appreciative that we were brought in and we were a
Mhm.
big part of all the decisions that were made in the
Yeah.
service. It was a limited group of people that could come because it was COVID. But it was like, when I tell you, I've never felt less closure in my life at a funeral. We've been to our fair share of funerals, and I know
Yeah.
how powerful going through those motions can be for healing. I walked in and felt like I was a stranger.
Mhm. Yeah.
People, and I think because people heard horrible things about us. They thought we were these awful people that abandoned our father and thought that our mother poisoned us against him. And nobody came up and offered their condolences to us. Like, people
Mhm.
avoided us. And I mean, I don't know what I was expecting, but I'm sitting there like, I've grown up with a lifetime of abuse and we were by his side through it all. And for the
Mhm.
last how many years we just said we can't do this anymore. I need to get healthy. and we did what we needed to do to get healthy, and now we are the villains.
Mhm.
And you know what? During that time, that was hard, and I felt like we were robbed of our time to have that closure until we realized we could do it on our own time.
Yeah.
But you come to realize that people are some people's opinions just don't matter, and people's condolences and empathy, sympathy doesn't matter.
It's not gonna help your healing.
No.
It's
And
not.
the right people will be by your side. Like
Yeah.
this is the thing. It's these times that you really look at it as opportunity. It's an opportunity where you can really weed out the people that aren't for you and really don't care, because there was a lot of people that could have reached out and said, "This doesn't sound like you guys.
Mhm.
We've known you our whole life. We've known you your whole life.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, we're hearing that you're being like the X, Y, and Z. Like, what's going on?" But if people aren't going to take an opportunity to understand the full story, then just let them. As Mel
Mhm.
Robbins says, let them.
Yeah, just let them.
Mhm.
Absolutely. But yes, the the healing from this loss of our dad, not just our dad, but he also was very abusive. It was a very complicated relationship, was another really long road for us.
Mhm.
I think what was challenging is that we kept thinking back on the good times with him when we really did need to reflect on both sides,
Yeah.
where you get those conflicting emotions coming through. And what has happened with me over time in still thinking about him a lot is, like I said earlier on in this episode, is that I have a lot of compassion
Mhm.
and my heart breaks for him to think of the pain that he felt internally and the times that we were growing up in and the product of his upbringing of not talking about emotions and having so much pride to not asking for help, which resulted in a lot of this. I just feel so sad for him, and I feel so grateful to be in the environment that I'm in now where we can talk openly about these things to bring
Mhm.
awareness to everybody. Bring awareness that, 1, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You don't know what somebody's going through,
You really don't.
and you can always offer your help to somebody that is close to you, but they have to be willing to take it, and if not, just be there with compassion and love for them with what they're going through, because sometimes they do just need to feel through it. It is up to them if they wanna accept that help.
Yeah. It's just our whole life story, it is full of so much heartbreak, but I've learned, and I am so grateful. I'm grateful to like God, Jesus, therapists,
Mm.
everything that has been on this earth as a resource to me to
Mhm.
learn and grow from it. And I think like when you go through these really difficult things and they're really painful, we have choices we can make.
Yeah.
We can choose, am I going to use it as an excuse to be angry and bitter? And am I going to use it as an excuse to play victim? And am I going to create an entitlement attitude that people need to pay me back for what the world's done to me? Or are
Mhm.
you going to take all that pain and turn it into a power? Like, how are you going to
Oh,
catch
yeah.
that energy and throw it back out there and use it to launch you? Because the insights and the healing that I have in my life now never would have come
Mhm.
from this. Would I trade all of it to have my dad be who he was before? Like in a heartbeat, I would. But there is so much that we've learned through this. And I am so, so grateful to be on this other side where I can look back at it and not be angry, where I
Mhm.
can. And I think what's helped is, and again, it's difficult to explain it. It's understanding, right? Like, at
Mm.
14, I didn't need to understand my dad and what he was going through. I was too young.
Yeah.
But, I picked up a picture of him at 32. It was his 32nd birthday, and I'm looking at the cake, it's got 32, and I mean, I'm 32 right now, and it hit me, and I was just thinking, "Oh my gosh." I mean, you've got 2 kids. There is so much that's about to happen to you. And I think of myself now, like, how would I handle if all that stuff came stacked up against me? Like, it
Yeah.
was a lot that he had to take on. Doesn't excuse what we went through, but when
Helps you
you can
understand.
when you can when you can under and look, to an extent, there are
Mhm.
some really awful things that happen to people out there. I'm not saying you have to understand like really horrific things in our situation to get ourselves to a point where we could understand. It didn't make an excuse for the behavior we were exposed
Mhm.
to, but it helps me to understand like it really wasn't about me. It wasn't about you. This was
No.
someone who was really sick and really hurting.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I look back on now after all this healing is that he was sick and he was hurting. And I can rest easy knowing we did everything we could as loving daughters and wife with our mom that we
Mhm,
possibly could. And there does come a time where you're in those situations where if it is impacting your quality of life, you do need to make that tough decision.
mhm.
But no, you don't have to make it alone. So many resources out there to help you. Um, Turn to people that you trust. But yes, we just have so much love for him now looking back on him. It's nothing but love. And
Yeah,
we are so blessed to have the good times that we had with him.
I'm so grateful we have those memories.
Mhm.
I am so grateful that we got to know him,
Yeah.
who he truly was before that all happened, and I mean, I still love him and I miss him
Mhm.
and I wish I could have my one thing if I could make a wish to God is like I'd love to have a conversation with that man I knew
Yeah,
as a small child. Um and and
absolutely.
yeah, I could cry, so I don't want to keep going on, but
I want to circle back on a point that you made quickly before we end this podcast is that you can use your experiences as your superpower and good Lord Almighty made that happen for us. I mean, like, that's why we're here. We're using our experiences now to help other people. When we talk to other people, we have such a different level of communicating where we see somebody reacting a certain way. We don't get reactive. We observe and we approach them with love.
yeah.
And I do that not just in like my day to day, but like with work, anybody that I see, I don't get angry anymore. I'm not an angry person. And that's another thing you need to think of is if you want to use your experiences as your superpower, you have to let the anger go.
Mhm.
Get to the core of what you're feeling. Let the anger go because that is just toxic and it's not serving anybody. It's not serving you. It's just hurting you even more. And let go of the victim mentality if that is going to help you move forward. I don't recall a single point in our experience of us saying that we're a victim.
Mhm.
We I remember mom saying that we're survivors and that we're
Yeah.
warriors and that we're strong women, and she had those mantras for us ready anytime that we were feeling weak and
Mhm.
down, and it's okay to feel that sometimes, but I never used that I was a victim of verbal and emotional abuse, a victim of somebody that
By definition we were, but that's not how we carried
that's not how we
ourselves
carried
through it.
ourselves, and that's where you get the difference of how you come out at the other end of this is that by definition, we were, but we identified as survivors.
And this journey that you go on when you're healing from that kind of abuse and kind of trauma, it is not a straight line. Like,
Mm,
when we're talking about these moments where we saw our mom laugh again and we were all having fun and we all started laughing again, those laughs were in between some weeks of a lot of crying and
mhm.
yelling, and because we were so raw and so there was just so much healing, and healing can be so painful, and I just I don't want people to give up during that healing process because it is the most beautiful thing when you come out on the other side
Yeah.
and just your perspective on life is so profound. Like it's I can't even I'm struggling because there's no words for me to just explain how grateful I am for where I'm at now. And if I could go back to myself when I was 22, 23, and just look at her and say, you're going to have an amazing life. Just
Mhm.
keep pushing forward, keep healing, keep doing what you're doing. And I don't know who needs to hear that right now, but just keep pushing forward, keep healing, and please show yourself some love because you are doing
Mhm.
some really, really hard work right now.
Yeah, you are. Ash, I think that's a great place to end
Mhm.
this. I that word of encouragement, I know somebody can use it. I know I could use that word of encouragement every single day.
We all can use it.
Yeah, but that's our story, guys. That's
Mm.
where all this is coming from. Maybe some other things will pop up here and there in our future episodes, but
Yeah.
that is what eventually brought us here on this
Yeah.
podcast to share our experiences with you, what we learned from them, and how we use them as our superpower, as Ashley likes to say, in life
Mhm.
today.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It is once again always a pleasure to delve into one of life's many lessons. Today we covered quite a few lessons we learned. We feel so honored to be able to share our story with everyone, and we
Mhm.
hope that you were able to either feel heard, maybe understand yourselves a bit more, maybe discover different ways to approach things to heal and to grow. And we really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with us today.
Yes. And don't forget to join us for our next episode where we'll continue to explore and evolve together. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe and share with a friend who may benefit from this episode. You can follow us on social media, Instagram and TikTok at Evolving with Every Step for more insights and behind the scenes content.
And until next time, remember to embrace every experience with curiosity so you can evolve with every step. We'll see you in our next episode.